that's what criticism is good for. It helps you expose the lies and myths and biases of your society and kind of change your mind. But repentance also includes changing your actions and then getting to work, building and being a part of the dominion mandate to make the earth beautiful and make it gorgeous and add to it. That's your job. So today I want to talk about a further diving into the themes of this broadcast, the podcast, everything that we've done on A Neighbor's Choice, on Things Hidden. And so I've titled this episode Power Made Perfect, one of my favorite passages in the New Testament, where Paul quotes Jesus saying that his power is made perfect in what? Weakness. What is that? We hear a lot on the political scene and the cultural scene about power. The left talks about power. They talk about things like hegemony, which is this kind of power structure that is embedded in our society. The right talks about power. The globalists, the New World Order, entrenched what they call the regime. That's the new trendy word on the right. People are always talking about power politics. You need to know about the managerial revolution. You need to know about, Italian philosophy. All these different things are being thrown around. Nietzsche talks about power, right? And all these things are being talked about in politics today. And I thought, it's good for us to explain how this power works. And so this topic is about why criticism and wealth are not enough. On the one hand, most of what you see in culture and political commentary, so cultural commentators, cultural influencers, podcasters, Instagrammers, whatever, they are trying to influence the culture to agree with the way they see things and to agree with their attitude or their religion or their little angle, their little niche topic about whatever it is that they're talking about in society, whether it's politics, whether it's gender relationships, the racial politics and identity politics that's become more and more strident in over the years. They all want to give their take and try to speak their take with unique, use of algorithms and keywords and funneling their audience and all these little gimmicks to try to have their voice be heard amongst the cacophony of voices in the digital landscape. And I think that's a fool's errand, the whole thing. Now, I know I'm doing this too, right? But what I'm doing with this program has always been motivated by something beyond this program, which is what I call incarnational action, incarnational truth. My goal is to lay the foundation of what's happening around us so we understand what's happening, and that's fine, and to understand the forces at play, to understand that Christianity is so much more exciting. It's this dynamic force moving history forward. In fact, creating what we now consider to be history, creating a concept like the pursuit of objective truth, of telling the truth no matter whether it offends you or your tribe or your kin or what have you. Telling the truth has its own beauty and truth within the Christian worldview of reality. Christianity births the person. It births things like freedom of association and speech and freedom of conscience, all these different things that are so vital for creating the stabilizing civilization aspects that we've all come to take for granted and are increasingly concerned, some of us, that they're being frayed at the seams. Christianity births the person. It births history. It births the concept of the future, that the future is better than the past. These are things that Nietzsche and the eternal return of the pagans can't adequately explain. They have nothing to offer. They're stuck in an eternal cycle. Christianity says we're going somewhere, and it has meaning and it has agency in how we get there. We have to have our agency considered. It's not just a fate, as the pagans thought. So, with that said, I firmly want to explain something. Why is it that I talk about these ideas, but yet I'm saying talking about ideas and politics and culture won't do anything? Because if that's all we do is talk and criticize, but we don't do anything to put skin in the game to embody truth through action in the physical world, then it will be toothless. It will be a disembodied experience, which means it's not real. And Christianity is about action. It's about performance. Christ never writes down a word as far as we understand. He is doing things. Everything he does is our action sequences. Walking on water. He's not writing a idiom. He's walking on water. Those who live by the sword die by the sword. As he makes someone put away their sword. That's an action that you remember. When he says turn the other cheek. When he says go walk the extra mile. When he says all these different things about when he washes the feet of his followers. When he dies on the cross, when he carries his cross, right? When he comes back from the dead, those are all action things that people then put concepts around it to try to distill in that realm of the mind what is something that is actually embodied and experienced through history. And that's where mimetic anthropology is superior to ideological kind of ideological concepts that are kind of divorced from action. Those things can get Christianity into a kind of dead end because it's not really Christian. So action is where we go. And so when you are talking, you see a lot of these influencers coming along through the years and things that are topics, wars are being relitigated, dogmas, mythologies, is the FDA sacrosanct, as we've been led to believe for many people for decades? That's starting to be, well, maybe not. Is the NIH sacrosanct in its scientism, or is it really just a captured entity for people who are amoral at best? All these different things are being relitigated and reassessed in real time, and those are all good things. But ultimately, speaking out against these things and lobbying even for a politician to get elected as kind of the only action point that people have to do is, again, a impotent exercise in trying to have change. Because you can't, that's not what real power is about. Power is in the world of action. And power is made perfect in weakness, and what is perceived to be weakness. It is considered to be weak to not be politically engaged to the point where that's your main priority of action, right? We are told that's a kind of politically weak thing to do. That's something left and right both agree. Now, for people who are sometimes skeptical of political action, there's these silos called the Little Caesars where they say, well, we need to have an FDR type kingly president and that'll fix everything. And they make their little arguments for it. And again, I think that's a misreading of history in terms of where history is going. You can always look back to moments where there was a strong executive that can correct certain things or make things worse, and how elegant those seem compared to the dysfunctional oligarchy we have today. But the only way through history is to go through it, not to try to retreat back to an epoch in a more idyllic stage in the past. That's not going to get us anywhere. So we have to move forward, which means returning to monarchs and so forth is just another fantasy. It's another ideology. It's a fantasy of the mind that's not based in where history is actually moving because of the personhood revolution of Jesus. So you don't lean against the personhood revolution, you go with it. You don't try to outpace it like the radical so-called left tries to do in its attempt to outcompete the Christian project of redeeming victims and oppressed people and marginalized people. You go with the pace of Christ in history and let his balance of healing both the oppressed and the oppressor work itself out the way he models for us with all of his action sequences that he demonstrates for us. And words, he does speak words, but again, the focus is all embodied in actual visuals that you can emulate in your life. And so some folks who are in the camp of kind of this new right, they say, well, there's a segment you'll see that'll say, well, we just have to we need to check out of politics and build wealth and build communities. So some people want to build a commune community. Some people want to build, some kind of intentional community or private city. Some people want to move to a certain state or county or something and build a community. And those are all, I guess you would say, reasonable things to do and think about. But they're kind of lateral moves. They don't really change the fundamental problem of what we're all facing, which is this system of modernism, of state worship, of oligarchic power structures all built into it. It's all kind of coming undone, and the mythology's not holding up very well, and people are kind of having a crisis of identity, and they're trying to retreat or whatever. And there's a time for tactical, escape. Even Jesus says, when you see these calamities happen, when he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, he's predicting that it's happening. He says, go to the hills. There's a time to get out of Dodge. And there's obviously cataclysmic moments that can happen where people need to be away from cities or what have you. But at the end of the day, that's not the final move of history, because the Bible begins in a garden and ends in a city. So the idea is that you don't run away from the idea of building and constructing and creating community, but you redeem it. So you can't just criticize. I mean, here's what I'm getting at. You have all these folks exposing Epstein Island, things that happened with the lies for wars, things that happen with the lies for medicine, these different things that you see happening all around us, the dollar myth, eroding. All of these things are happening, and there's often this desire to say, well, I'll expose it. So influencers come out and they expose it, or they do a 10-part series or a 10-part Twitter thread or a video or a documentary. And if by exposing, everybody talk about this wicked evil, somehow that's doing something. But it's not really doing much if it's not grounded with incarnational action to do points. And then there's other people that say, oh, no, don't criticize, just be quiet, build wealth. And again, it's kind of a lateral move. You're not really changing the dynamic that's oppressing people, that's creating this kind of collective mimetic insanity and loss of self and loss of identity. So just building up wealth, it gives you more leverage in relationship to being able to influence your community and maybe your politicians and so forth to enact policies that are marginally better than what's on the books now. But again, all of this is like pushing a boulder up a hill. We hear this image all the time, but I think it's very helpful. Without incarnational radical signs and wonders, the best criticisms and exposés of all the conspiracies or corruptions or evils in the world, it's like you're pushing a boulder up of a mountain. It's so much work with such little payoff. Because ultimately, the way in which you defeat mythology is to overcome it, to go beyond the boundaries of what the myth that we're all in says is possible. Myth, even in its modern form, which takes the form of ideology and all these other more clever disguises of what used to be called Thor and Marduk and so forth, mythology is the kind of mimetic hive mind consensus that's kind of underpinning, even in an unspoken way, the world that we all inhabit as social creatures. And that myth is based ultimately on fear. You can't go past the myth or else you're in trouble. You get hurt. Why do you think whenever I speak about creating anti-gravity devices that humans can enjoy, that negates the paradigm of transportation and energy and travel and so forth that we have today? Or if I talk about energy too cheap to meter, or I talk about elemental transmutation, taking trash and transmuting it at relatively low temperatures into precious metals or rare earth elements. The number one thing that often comes upon people's mind when they hear that is fear. Well, if you do that, I heard people that do great inventions get killed or corrupted. Or if they get them through, it means they've made a deal with the devil, which means they're part of the establishment. So you can't trust them. There's a lot there. I think part of that fear is a kind of entrenched envy. Well, who are you to say we could do great things? That's just a kind of mimetic. I'll put it this way. Peter Thiel once said that Elon Musk is kind of a negative mimetic role model in the sense that he's got so many different businesses. He's got such wealth. He's such a high performer. He's sleeping on the factory floor, working around the clock, doing all these big, high concept businesses that people have a hard time wanting to emulate him as a role model because he's just so high above other people's ability to get going in terms of like managing all of those different enterprises and at the level that he does. And so I think there is some of that kind of negative mimetic role modeling that maybe this message can sometimes have, which is when I talk about such great concepts, and it's just my favorites, but I know there's others that I'm missing, and I'm sure you could tell me some that are so extraordinary that meet our needs at a deeper, more beautiful level, and actually treat the earth more beautiful too. That these things are just so high in the sky, they're so pie in the sky that it almost kind of is a negative repulsion. Like, well, what's the point? I mean, it's just so beyond me. What can I do? Therefore, it just depresses me to think about those great dreams, so don't think about it. Can't go there. Jesus said we're going to move mountains if you have faith like a mustard seed, not even a ton of faith, just a little bit of faith like a mustard seed can move a mountain, and that we would do greater things in him. So I take that seriously, and I take that with full confidence. So we have to overcome that fear matrix and the mythology. What are some of the mythological trappings that we're living in under right now, that we're at the end of history? That, the standard model of physics is pretty rock solid. That, relativity and quantum are pretty entrenched, established dogmas. Don't you dare question them if you want to be invited to polite society. Those are solid. Take them to the bank. You don't want to be ostracized as a strange person or some kind of a wacko. There's a mimetic pressure to just stay in line with these dogmas because they seem so high above us. They seem so settled, so to speak, by all these kind of, charismatic institutions, which have their own legitimacy in different ways, but maybe not as much as we have kind of assumed and faithfully accepted. So there's this kind of daunting feeling of who would dare go into the holy of holies like quantum or relativity or other things and say, let's rethink things all the way back to the foundation to get it right, to see if this actually makes sense with the way the world works. And that fear and that mimetic pressure forces people to kind of stay in the lane of, well, let me expose what happened on Epstein Island. Let me expose what happened with this war. Let me expose what happened in the terrorist attacks, right? Or let me expose what happens in the real underpinning of this or that phenomenon in our society. That's a safer place to be. You can speak, feel like you did something, and maybe if you're lucky, get some dollars and eyeballs towards you and feel like you did something. Not going to move anything. You're still pushing this giant boulder up a rock, and it's just putting so much effort and getting such little payoff. So it's about leverage, right? There's about leverage. You have to find out how to get it so that the truth is not pushing a boulder up a mountain, but rolling it gently down the mountain right to where it needs to be. It just falls into place. And that comes with incarnational innovations. That comes with being able to challenge concepts of myth that we're enclosed in that we're not thinking about. That's how they're so entrenched. That's what a hegemony really feels like, or a myth. You're not constantly testing it in your mind. You don't wake up every day saying, wow, so glad that these foundational truths, like we've reached the end of history and now we're just quibbling over the little details of power sharing. You're not thinking that consciously, but we're living in that water. We're swimming in that fishbowl. We don't see it. And that mythology is not from God. It's not related to Christ. It's something that we've made a mistake in convincing to ourselves that this is true. And a lot of it has to do with the media environment that we're in and how media shapes the way we think of the world and our relationship to each other. Another problem that I want to address real quickly is this idea of bad innovation and good innovation. So often, when I talk about my favorite topics like energy too cheap to meter, anti-gravity, 24/7 energy panels, cures for diseases that could be right under our noses, using dietary implementations or drugs that are already FDA approved that just might have a different indication that could be useful. There's this bias towards, well, man, you sound like those tech bros or something. You sound like people who are talking about, having artificial wombs, for children to be born in without having to have a mother. No. There's a lot of bad innovation. Most of the bad innovation that's happening is a denial of loving our body as much as our soul. When you have a concept like, let's innovate. Okay, what do you want to innovate? Well, let's create artificial wombs so women don't have to, have the baby in their womb. That's a hatred of the body. It's a hatred of the female body as it was made. It's a hatred. It's a denial of it, that we can overcome it with something better. It's not. And it's also a disrespect to the child. It's a disrespect to the whole part of creation being good and beautiful in and of itself, not needing to be transcended. So that's a kind of pseudo-gnostic move. Or look at Ozempic. We recently did a program on this dangerous drug that's being pushed around by all the usual mythological pushers and media. And again, what is it trying to do? It's trying to help people with dealing with obesity or weight loss. But it's a shortcut to heaven. The heaven is trying to be healthier, but it's a shortcut using things that are not healthy ways to treat the body, using things that destroy you, using what amounts to a kind of synthetic form of reptile toxin to basically, paralyze your body to a point where you're not actually healing the metabolic processes that led to the dysfunction in the first place. But we are so caught up with the ego and the image of someone thinking about us. Oh, look, I've got to get to this ideal shape. People will like me more, and I'll get there faster this way without having to have, a kind of reassessment of my environmental toxins and all these complicated things that drive people nuts. I get it. And getting away from seed oils and all these terrible things that are all under every corner, it seems like. It's much easier to just take a pill and see if that'll help you get to where you need. Shortcut to heaven leads to hell on earth. That's a Gnostic, pseudo-Gnostic kind of thing, not respecting the body, not respecting creation as it's made, trying to make these little synthetic things that you can patent that give you they give you the appearance of successful change, but really creating deathly results for your thyroid or whatever else is going on with those horrible side effects these things have. So there's a bias even amongst those who are in the anti-establishment world. There's a bias towards, well, if we're going to have big radical change, new physics, for example, a new map of physics, a new theory of physics, a new unification of physics or science, if we're going to have fusion, nuclear fusion, so-called nuclear fusion, it seems like we're always looking at, well, it's got to be super expensive, super complicated. It's got to be big. It's got to require massive heat if it's nuclear fusion or something. If it's a new theory, there's all these. I mean, I'm not the first person to say new physics needs to happen, but, I think what we represent on this show with the Yuan theory and Dr. Yu's work in that regard, and my work alongside him to try to help explain this to the public and add evidence to this new physics model, one thing we have is that it's very simplified compared to the standard model of physics. Dr. Yu's theory is staggeringly simple, staggeringly confounding to the wise of the world, right? Which is what truth should do typically. It should confound the wise of the groupthink hive mind. But there's this desire, well, I've got a new alternative physics theory, and it's this complicated, bizarre, imposition of all these, exotic words and exotic elemental 182 or something, and that's the secret of the 15 dimensions. And this comes from, again, gnostic influence in our society. Somebody asked me about the multiverse. This is science fiction. That's why they peddle it in Marvel comic books all the time, to reinforce to the masses these kind of like underlying assumptions about the world, that there's a multiverse, so that, nothing matters. It's all just relative nonsense. It's just a house of mirrors reality that we're in, which creates defeatism. It creates, again, retrenching to watching influencers, or maybe being an influencer who just talks about how problems are so abundant, talks about feminism, talks about this group, that group, this, fraud, this criminality, this wicked war, which all those things, again, you can criticize things. It's good to do so. But if that's all you're doing so you can make your grift and make money off of that, you're not part of the solution. You're just part of the problem, because you're getting people excited when they know. See, there's a repentance that takes place when you reveal the truth about a war or an event in our recent history or past history, or you understand things at a deeper level, and you question your assumptions and your culture's habits of thinking. Those are good. But then if you just redirect that to voting a certain way, or being angry at a certain group, or a gender, or whatever, or ethnicity, or any of this stuff, if you're just grounding that into, well, I've got them now, if that's the payoff that you've given your audience, and then you're making your little money, you're not doing anything. You're not doing anything. In fact, you're making it worse. You're just feeding a dialectic. The Christian does not spend his time playing this eternal game of scapegoat hot potato, trying to throw, oh, it's this group, it's that group, it's this is feminism. And then now we find out feminism is even deeper than we thought. Now you conservatives are feminists, and now you people are bad, or this group is bad, or we have to defeat power with the empire, or some kind of Caesar figure. All this is hot potato dialectic nonsense. This is child's play. This is not what Christians do. Christians are here to make peace, and then to create the solutions which make these old mythological ways of thinking and doing and using violence to solve problems null and void, to non-violently, peacefully make them not needed, withering on the vine. So that's why we have to avoid this bias that we have whenever we think of, oh, David wants to do nuclear fusion. What do you think in your head? You think of these expensive nuclear fusion companies and private public partnerships where there's endless billions of dollars and taxpayer dollars, or if it's a private company, maybe it's these grants, or it's, millions and millions of venture capital rounds, and they never get anything off the ground, blowing up expensive $1 million degree chambers, blowing things up, trying to make things. Oh, that's how, surely if we haven't created this energy yet, it's because we haven't put enough explosions, money, right? So-called experts in a room, endless specialists, knowledge with our little instrumentations and computer analysis. It's got to be bigger and grander than anything we've ever done. That's our bias as hubristic Tower of Babel innovators. You see what I mean? We are biased to say, well, anything that could be beyond what we've done so far, like you say, nuclear fusion, well, it must be like recreating the dynamics of the sun within a chamber, and therefore we need all these expensive measurements and protections and all these different things, and it produces no excess heat. It doesn't produce anything that is greater than the input to make this elaborate money-sucking monstrosity happen. Same thing with the collider. Just this big giant nothing burger, nothing to it. And yet people, because they buy into myth, they can't just accept that it's nothing to it. So they make up stupid ideas like it's a time portal. I mean, this is the stupidest stuff in the world. Again, mythology. both mythology as the establishment sees it. Oh, this will help us find the true God particle. No, that won't. It's a total waste of time. Big, giant fraud scam system. Number, even if they think it, even if the folks working on it are true believers, they're still working on something that is fundamentally flawed. And then two, the people who will say, well, yeah, I don't believe in that stuff. When you say, well, what is it? Well, it's an Illuminati thing. Well, look, people may use it. Dumb people with rich trust fund budgets in the establishment Davos crowd may play games and little hocus pocus games, but that doesn't make the reality of them opening up some freaking portal a real thing. It's not. And you believing that shows how much you believe in them rather than God. Okay, God, we don't do that stuff. It's not even a real thing. It's just a giant fraud. And you, because you buy, not you yourself, but maybe you, the general you, we buy into these mythological trappings that, oh boy, oh my goodness, the establishment could unleash a portal to all kinds of evil entities. Oh my goodness, you're reinforcing the defeatist loser mentality that they need for them to continue to grift people into endless nihilism and meaninglessness. But history is going to go somewhere, and it is going somewhere. And the better we wake up to that, we can lean into it and be a part of it in a way that's constructive in our generation instead of waiting for other generations to figure this out. We can get on the ball faster, right? Not have to wait for our great-great-grandchildren to pick up all the mess that we can do. So that's why it's important to realize that power made perfect in weakness means you're going to do things which going to make other people think, my goodness, you're shunning politics as a major thing of concern. Wow, that's a weak move. You're going to get destroyed. Oh, you're saying it's not just enough to go make a lot of money and then you can have influence to influence your community. No, that's a weak move. You got to make a lot of money. Well, all those things have their proper place. But ultimately, we should be focused on overcoming the fear that encloses us in this mythological framework that we're in, which says we're at the end of history. All innovation is going to be expensive. It's going to be big. It's going to be complicated. Any new physics theory should have all these bizarre, complicated equations that confound the person. No, wrong Gnostic child living in an adult body. Wrong. Physics is more simple than you could possibly imagine. Physics is something that even a 5-year-old can comprehend, even a 6-year-old. Okay? That's how simple physics is. And the physics is also going to relate to social behavior, mimetic theory, biology, all those things. I know I'm going off a little bit further than the scope of this discussion, but I can't help but just keep showing people there's so much beauty here that when you get the physics right, you'll understand that it fits perfectly like a glove with social behavior, and it fits perfectly with some of the biological insights that we can learn with this kind of paradigm shift. But first, you have to have fear being dissipated. You have to have the courage to do something that will make you, somebody on a Wikipedia page might say something weird about you. Do you want everybody to see that? I mean, look, it can be tough. I get it. To be smeared and lied to. I get it. But you have to overcome that fear. You have to put your trust in God, not people and their what they perceive of you. The prestige that you want to accumulate from humans is a vaporous thing. It's here today, gone tomorrow. One minute you're a hero, the next minute you're a laughingstock. One minute you're an iconic warrior, the next minute you're a defeated fool. These things come and go. Don't put your faith in that. Put your faith in what is true and beautiful and good and pro-human. That's what God's pro-human. You should be too. You're part of his community. You should share that same pro-human attitude. And you should expect to understand that power made perfect in weakness means that you cannot claim to, I want little Caesar power. We got to lie as much as the left. We got to put everybody away in prison as much as they do. We got to eliminate them by force, by force, by force. That's so stupid. You didn't understand anything about what Jesus said. Power made perfect in weakness. Wonder, what does that mean? Learn what that means. So it's not enough just to criticize, not enough just to build wealth if you don't want to criticize. Build wealth, that's okay, but do it in the service of doing things that actually meet the people where they are and eliminates the myths that they're enclosed in. Right now, it's not just that we're in the myth that we're at the end of history. We also believe in this myth that Again, anything that is innovative, it's like this dumb, this is one of the problems I have, these dumb dialectic binary things, right? Either you're innovation good team or innovation bad team. Both are stupid. Come on. There's people that say innovation, if you like innovation too much, you're like a Davos, World Economic Forum person, which means no, Ozempic's bad. There's a lot of stuff that's bad. Most of the stuff that money goes to are basically projects that go nowhere, endless cash cow fundraising, dead ends with hype. So yeah, we're not saying all innovation is good. We're not also saying that all innovation is bad. Innovation is simply extending the human species and our abilities so that we can alleviate some of the effects of scarcity that happen in the fall. Because we are supposed to help renew creation. Paul talks about it in Romans, that creation is longing for the revealing of the sons of God to liberate it from its bondage to decay. That means it's waiting for us to use our agency, to use a hermeneutic of suspicion towards the dogmas of our time, not in a willy-nilly way. That's where discernment is so important, because once you start saying, well, establishment physics is wrong, you end up getting swayed and tickled by all kinds of bizarre, egotistical, crazy, gnostic fantasy games in the anti-establishment world of, new physics or alternative physics. So that's a distraction. And, getting caught up in mimetic rivalries with different factions and different groups who are supposed to be your enemies. That's again, mimetic fascination that distracts you from your real purpose. We're to be participants. Once we repent, that's what criticism is good for. It helps you expose the lies and myths and biases of your society and kind of change your mind. But repentance also includes changing your actions and then getting to work, building and being a part of the dominion mandate to make the earth beautiful and make it gorgeous and add to it. That's your job. That's why you're made in God's image, so that you can be a vessel for his creative power in making the world a more beautiful, nonviolent, loving, peaceful world. That's your job. When you're aware of this, that's what you're called out to do in the ecclesia. That's what your goal is. If you want to say you imitate Jesus, you should be imitating Jesus and meeting people where they are. And that's why I talk about signs and wonders all the time, because Jesus did not just walk out onto a hilltop and just start saying, hey, you guys are all wrong and sinners and you're terrible and this is a fraud and feminism is a disaster and conservative Inc. is a disaster and they're doing horrible things on that island over there and they're doing all this stuff and they're all corrupt. Okay, thanks. That's it. And you can contribute to my Patreon. That's not what he did, okay? He's performed signs and wonders because he met people where their needs were. They were afflicted by different types of scarcity. Their health was scarce. They had blindness. They had afflictions. They had leprosy. They had handicap, being handicapped in different ways. And those are all forms of the effects of the fall. Those are all forms of scarcity in some sense, right? Of lack, of fallenness. And he was exercising dominion over those things, meeting people where their physical material needs were, and then also bringing them spiritual nourishment as well. But they weren't, one was better than the other. They were both equally important. And you have to have that. So you can't go around the world saying, I want to change this law. And if I get enough people together, we'll be able to push this boulder up against this inertia of this mountainside and get it up to the top and pass this bill and force the culture with some kind of artificial imposition of law to start acting better when it comes to marriage, or child rearing, or nutrition, or all these other things, right? That's not going to work. You have to create signs and wonders that meet people where their physical lack is, their health or their, pollution, the price of being able to afford gas in the pump, to buy a car, to be in debt. You have to buy a car. You have to be in debt to buy a car, to buy a house. It's too out of control and unaffordable. All those basic needs. So heal people's lack of affordable housing. Make innovations so that housing is just extraordinarily, beautifully inexpensive and safe and beautiful and elegant. Figure that out. I wish I knew more about that. I want to learn more about that and what that might look like. And the same thing for, energy. Find ways of being able to be free so that when the power goes out, when there's a natural disaster, you're perfectly fine to continue to run all your materials and you're not causing any harm to the environment or any harm to yourself. You're doing just fine. And then give back and love your neighbor and figure out a way to scale that material up for everybody else to enjoy. And the same thing goes for, a whole host of different things that I like to talk about as examples of signs and wonders. But as we work on those signs and wonders, that will give us the confidence in our hearts. It'll give us the purpose of direction and the vision to then be able to make those criticisms about the status quo with much more joy, with much more strength and courage and confidence, without this prickling fear lacing our rhetoric, or this anger, resentment that's lacing our rhetoric and making us part of the dialectic of tit for tat, mimetic rivalry. It's a waste of time. When we learn to fix our eyes on something we can work towards, building something beautiful that is astounding, that goes beyond what the established physics textbooks say is possible, that goes beyond the established historical textbooks that say we've basically reached the end of history and now we're quibbling over power differentials, would say, no, actually, no. The world is full of wonder. The world is full of crackling with opportunity, crackling with opportunities that don't require state power, don't require the oligarchic corporations to maintain. And I know that's scary on a lot of ways. I've already rehearsed a few of the reasons why. I've already explained those to you. But it doesn't matter. Fear not is our mission. We don't fear, we love, and we have courage and confidence that we have the tools necessary in this period of history to be able to enact beautiful, elegant changes that scratch the itch of the public better than the current old dying tyrants do. They will then listen to you all day long about spiritual nourishment and getting our heads out of these mentally ill ideologies. They'll almost kind of goes hand in hand in this organic way. And you'll find that once you get some of those beautiful down payments on the authority of Christ enacted in history, you'll then find that pushing up that rock is not that hard. Now it's going downhill very gently. You just push it and people start to naturally snowball mimetically on board with more beautiful ways of identity and relating to one another and being, made in this image of beauty that we're all called to be. So that's it for this program today. I hope it's been helpful. I hope you understand what I have basically tried to convey, why criticism and wealth building are not enough, because power is made perfect in weakness, which means we must pursue these beautiful signs and wonders that don't require tax dollars. They don't require complicated, bizarre theories and equations and all this nonsense. They don't require massive, endless, funding, billions of dollars. They don't require big, complicated machinery, big, high temperatures. Don't require all these like daunting things that we believe. And they don't require that you'll be persecuted, although that can't happen. It just requires us coming together, believing those things are possible and working to achieve them, using our talents. Some people are good at accounting. Some people are good at encouragement. Some people are good at wealth management. Some people are good at fundraising. Some people are good at engineering. Some people are good at, all kinds of stuff, material science. Some people are good at a host of things that will be important for all these signs and wonders to be designed so that we can showcase that beauty. So appreciate your time. You can email me hello@aneighborschoice.com or follow me at David Gornoski on Twitter, and we will talk again soon. Thanks.